Joining us now, Mark Calabria, Director of Financial Regulation Studies at Cato, and Matthew Yglesias, Fellow at the Center for American Progress. Matthew, let me just ask you, on the economics of this thing, we had quoted President Obama. He says we should spend the $700 billion better than giving money to millionaires and billionaires. I don't get that. I thought it was the people's money to begin with, Matthew.
Well, you know, it's a question about policy, right? Reducing tax rates on millionaires will deprive the government of a lot of revenue. So the question is, you know, what do we make that up with, right? I mean, if Republicans think they have great ideas of $700 billion worth of spending cuts, you know, they could put that on the table, but they're afraid to. We were told 10 years ago that these cuts were affordable, but the only reason they were made to look affordable was this kind of budget gimmickry that had them phase out. So now it's time for them to phase out, unless people are willing to come to the table with some kind of reasonable offsets.
You know, Mark, Matthew makes an interesting point, but isn't it true that when you lower tax rates overall for everyone, typically you see an increase in tax receipts for the government?
Well, and that certainly depends on what your current tax rates are, and there's a lot that goes into that. But I don't think you don't lose a dollar for dollar. And I do think that you don't want to do this at a time when the economy is weak. But, you know, I'll agree with Matt. You know, this is a question of, you know, where do you offset this from? I would be happy to lay out more. I'll lay out $1 trillion of spending cuts, and I would, of course, love the Republicans to get on board with that. I'm not expecting it anytime soon. But this is, at heart, about, do you think the government should be spending this money, or do you think we should be spending this money? I tell you, one of the things that bothered me the most about the president's speech is when he talked about, well, we're going to give tax cuts to people who need them. Who is he to decide who needs to keep their own money?
Matt, isn't the biggest problem for the Democrats right now that there's very little evidence that all the spending that's been done so far is working, is helping the economy?
Well, there's certainly no evidence that the Bush administration's tax policies helped the economy. You know, I mean, I remember when Bush came into office and he said this was going to spark growth.
How about the spending? What we
got was the weakest expansion in history, and then this gigantic economic collapse. You know, we've had some additional spending when Barack Obama has come in, and I think it's provided a lot of help to people who are in desperate need because of a very bad economic situation. And I don't think that sticking with the Bush administration's policies is going to be a path to anything.
Well, Mark Calabria, look, I mean, Obama is, in fact, sticking with most of it because the bulk of it is the middle-class tax cuts. It's over $2 trillion. So that's one point. But I want to ask you this. Take us back to 2003. The marginal tax rates were lowered in the middle of the year, Mark Calabria. What happened?
Well, you had growth come out of that. And
didn't tax receipts grow?
Yes, they did. So I don't necessarily think it's a given that if we keep these tax cuts in place that you're going to lose the same amount of revenue. You'll lose some revenue, but it's going to be nowhere near dollar for dollar. And I would be the first one to say we should make up that with spending cuts. And I would encourage anybody to look at the Cato website where we list recommended spending cuts. We're not afraid to say where you should cut. And I certainly would agree with that.
What about growth and jobs? No, it's growth and jobs. The Bush administration, Mark, claims that 50 straight months of jobs increases up to 8 million jobs. Is that true? I mean, no one has really examined the 2003 tax cut effect on the economy. What's your thinking?
Well, I think that is largely true. I mean, for the most part, you had pretty strong job growth then. Granted, a fair amount of it was driven by a housing bubble, and I think it's legitimate to question how realistic and how long-term that was. But you did have fairly strong job growth throughout that, and we certainly haven't seen that now.
You know, Mr. Boyce, let me just go back to you for a moment here. You've got the rich paying basically the majority of taxes here, right? I mean, the top 1% of all Americans are paying basically 40% of all federal income taxes. Top 10% pays 70%. So what about just the issue of pure fairness? How do you address
for one thing,
that?
I think it's misleading to focus only on income taxes. When you look at the payroll taxes people pay, it's spread much more evenly. But the fundamental reason why the rich have been paying a growing share of the taxes is that richest people have been getting a growing share of the income. This is why we get back to the question the president raised about who is in need here, right? I mean, if you do tax cuts that are broadly based, that helps a lot of people who are having problems with debts, who are having problems paying the bills, and can help get the economy moving again. The very richest people in America have been getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier in terms of a larger share of the overall pie. And there's really just no reason to think that they are in particular need of more money at this time, at a time when, you know, we have a long-term budget deficit problem that needs to be addressed.
Mark Calabria, why is it that nobody in Washington, I mean, I hear what Matt says, I appreciate his point of view, but Saving, investment, capital formation, productivity. It seems like nobody wants to link those to tax rates. It's all class warfare, Mark. Why is this? What is wrong with Washington? Why don't they get saving and investment and capital formation and incentives thereof?
I ask myself that every day. What is wrong with Washington? They just don't get it. I mean, because it comes down to about dividing up a pie rather than actually trying to grow a pie. The reason that a disproportionate share of the population has gotten a disproportionate income is because a disproportionate share creates wealth. You know, I would love to see everybody create more wealth, but this isn't about dividing up a pie. This is about creating a bigger pie. This is about growing the economy. And to do that, you need to have savings, you need to have investment, and that's going to come mostly from the top end. So I think we should be happy that we see that plowed back into creating a bigger economy.
Matt, Mark, thanks to both of you for joining us. We appreciate it. When we come back,